After months of rumours and with little left to the imagination, OnePlus has finally taken the wraps off of the new OnePlus 8 and OnePlus 8 Pro. The new phones represent some major changes to the series, including serious camera improvements, the addition of features like wireless charging, and, as has become a trend for OnePlus over the years, a price bump. The most expensive of the two is the OnePlus 8 Pro, but I'm handling that in a separate review. At $700, most will likely consider the standard OnePlus 8 before they consider its more expensive sibling. But the phone does represent a price bump compared to the previous generation OnePlus 7T, which came at $600. Does it warrant the extra cash, or is the OnePlus 8 worth skipping? I've been using it to find out. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. It really supports my work and I would appreciate that support. OnePlus generally updates the design of its phones once a year, meaning that we get a new design for every new number model. The same remains true here. The OnePlus 8 keeps a number of design elements from the previous generation OnePlus 7T, while making a few changes that ensure the device remains modern and interesting. Notably, on the front of the OnePlus 8, you'll get a 6.55-inch display with a hole punch cutout on the right for the front-facing camera. It's a nice change, and while the notch that was on the phone wasn't intrusive by any means, adding even that little bit of extra screen real estate helps ensure that the device is modern and fresh. The back of the phone, of course, is a lot more different. While the OnePlus 7T offered that huge circular camera bump, the OnePlus 8 swaps it out for a vertically aligned camera bump. The bump still protrudes from the back of the phone around the same amount, but it looks a lot better than last year's model. Unfortunately, the fact that there's a camera bump at all means that the phone won't sit quite flat on a desk, though that can be remedied with a case. The colours on the OnePlus 8 are more interesting too. The new device is available in an Interstellar Glow and Glacial Green, and both look great. I'm reviewing the Interstellar Glow model and I really like the look of it. That said, it's an absolute fingerprint magnet, so you may end up wanting to put a case on it or go for another option. On the left of the phone, you'll find the volume rocker, while on the right, you'll get a power button and the ringer switch. On the bottom, there's a USB-C port and the SIM card slot. Sorry folks, no headphone jack here. In the hand, the OnePlus 8 feels great. I love the overall size of the phone. It's weighted well, and it's well constructed. It's a good thickness too, not too thick and not too big. You will still have to reach a little to get to the top of the display with one hand, but that's no different than any other phone on the market these days. The design also offers a feature that users have been wanting for years: IP68 water resistance. In other words, while you probably shouldn't take it swimming, if you happen to drop it in the pool or the bath, it should survive just fine. The display on the device sits in at 2400 by 1080 pixels, which is fine but not great. To get the higher resolution display, you'll have to spring for the OnePlus 8 Pro, which steps things up to a 1440p display. Thankfully, the screen on the OnePlus 8 is still an AMOLED display, and it has a 90Hz refresh rate, making for a smooth animations and a nice feel. Again, the OnePlus 8 Pro is even smoother with its 120Hz display, but in a world where the majority of phones still offer 60Hz displays, a 90Hz refresh rate is still an upgrade. Under the display, you'll get an optical fingerprint sensor. It's nice that OnePlus has included it, but the sensor is pretty slow and it often doesn't work. I would have liked OnePlus to include an ultrasonic sensor instead, which is more secure and faster. That's especially true considering the fact that the only facial recognition feature included with the OnePlus 8 is through the basic front-facing camera, so not all that secure. You'll notice the edges of the display are slightly curved, which is a nice touch. I, however, would have preferred if OnePlus had a flat display. While the design looks good, OnePlus's palm detection isn't quite up to par, and I found myself accidentally touching the edges more than a few times, controlling software aspects that I didn't want to. Under the hood, the OnePlus 8 is one of the best performing Android phones on the market. The device offers a Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 processor, along with either 8GB of RAM and 128GB of storage, or 12GB of RAM and 256GB of storage. In day-to-day use, the phone performed excellently, both in normal use, including multitasking, and when gaming. Generally, games felt smooth and they loaded quickly too. Benchmarks show the phone is a top performer too. My model, which is the 12GB of RAM model, achieved an AnTuTu score of 579,600, which beats out every other phone I've tested, including the OnePlus 8 Pro. Though my 8 Pro model has 8GB of RAM instead of 12GB. On Geekbench 5, the phone didn't quite beat the LG V60 and it didn't come close to the iPhone 11 Pro's single-core score, but it still pretty much matched the other Android competition. Powering it all is a 4300 mAh battery, which I found to be more than enough to get through a full day of even relatively heavy usage, and it even lasted through part of the next day. That likely has to do with the fact that the phone has a 1080p display instead of a 1440p one, but the fact remains that while the battery isn't incredible like that of the LG V60, it will still be more than good enough for most. In a battery test, which involves streaming YouTube videos at 1080p for 3 hours over Wi-Fi and at full brightness, the phone ended the test with 76% of its battery life left, which is better than average, beating out the OnePlus 8 Pro, the Google Pixel 4 series, and the iPhone 11 Pro. It didn't beat the LG V60, but the LG V60's battery is a monster. OnePlus is finally adopting wireless charging too. But to actually take advantage of it, you'll need to go for the more expensive OnePlus 8 Pro. Hopefully, the standard OnePlus device will eventually get the feature, since it's one that users have long wanted. But for now, if you want wireless charging in a OnePlus phone, you'll need to shell out a little more cash. The camera on the OnePlus 8 is fine, and certainly better than previous generation OnePlus phones, but it's still not amazing. On the device, you'll get a 48 megapixel main sensor, a 16 megapixel ultra-wide sensor, and a 2 megapixel macro sensor. In day-to-day use, the camera can capture decent photos, but they're not quite as colorful as competitors, nor as detailed. That's especially true of the 2 megapixel macro lens, which just isn't up to par, at least compared to other flagships. It kind of feels like OnePlus slapped a macro lens into the device so that they could say it's a triple lens camera. That said, I don't really expect people to use the macro lens much anyway, so it may not matter. Shots taken at 10x zoom are pretty grainy too, unlike the Pixel 4 thanks to the Pixel 4's super res zoom feature. And low light shots aren't as bright as they could have been, and don't even come close to the iPhone 11 Pro nor the Google Pixel 4. When it comes to video, the phone supports 4K at 60 frames per second, and while video quality is good, it's not up to the likes of the iPhone 11 Pro, which in my opinion still offers the best video quality on a phone. Stabilization isn't quite as good, while colors aren't as bright or vivid. The front-facing camera is pretty good, but again not great. It'll do the job for most, but don't expect DSLR quality here. The speakers on the OnePlus 8 are pretty good. They can get relatively loud, and while the audio quality certainly doesn't match wearing headphones or listening through higher quality speakers, for day-to-day use they certainly get the job done. They're relatively detailed for phone speakers, though not as much as the Pixel 4 speakers, and while you can accidentally block the bottom speaker when watching a video in landscape, the same can be said for most other phones. Here's a quick comparison of the speakers on the OnePlus 8 compared to some of the other more popular phones. While the audio you hear in this comparison changes due to the microphone placement, the speakers you're listening to, and so on, at least you might be able to get an idea of the difference between these speakers and other high-end phones. Even the software experience is better on the OnePlus 8. OnePlus's Oxygen OS has always been relatively stripped back, but if there's been one complaint, it's the OnePlus shelf on the left side of the home screen, in place of the Google feed. Thankfully, the shelf is gone now. Other tweaks include different stock apps, however they're not really that big of an issue, and you can always install the Google versions if you want. Check out a more in-depth comparison between Oxygen OS and stock Android with the link in the description. The OnePlus 8 is easily the best OnePlus phone ever, except for the OnePlus 8 Pro. I don't just mean that it's more powerful than previous OnePlus phones, of course it is. But I mean that compared to other phones of their times, OnePlus phones have always skimped on some features, but come at a lower price. The OnePlus 8 sacrifices fewer features than ever, and while the trade-off is a higher price, if you have the money to spend, then you'll appreciate those extra features. Of course, that doesn't mean that the OnePlus 8 is perfect. While its performance, battery life, and design match other flagship phones, it still only has a 1080p display. Its camera still doesn't compete with the likes of the Pixel 4 and the iPhone 11 Pro, and it still doesn't have wireless charging. Now, the OnePlus 8 Pro, that's a real flagship competitor. I'll be uploading a full review of the OnePlus 8 Pro in coming days, and once I do, I'll post a link in the description. For the price, the OnePlus 8 is the best Android phone out there. If you have $700 to spend and want the best phone you can buy, the OnePlus 8 is it. If you can spend a little more cash, then it's worth considering the OnePlus 8 Pro. But if you can't or don't care about the extra features, then the standard device is an excellent choice. It's also worth considering the new iPhone SE if you don't mind using iOS instead of Android. After all, with a powerful A13 chip, good camera, and more, the iPhone SE may be the budget phone to beat right now. Thanks again for watching, and again, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. My name is Christian, and I'll see you next time. See ya.